I didn't plan to build a toll booth. I planned to grow tomatoes, program a chicken coop, and live so quietly the oaks forgot my name. Then, one Tuesday, an HOA decided my easement was optional, rolled in steel like a siege, and slammed a gate across the only road to my ranch. If you're hearing this, know one thing. They picked the wrong Texas rancher to corner. They tried to charge me to reach my own front door. So I did what any stubborn engineer with a sense of humor would do. I charged them back. I'm Ethan Morgan, 38, remote business consultant, lifelong tinkerer. 2 years back, I bought 30 acres outside Austin, overgrown fields, a tired farmhouse, a barn with opinions about gravity. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. I wired soil sensors into an irrigation system that waters like it reads weather, built a solar coop door that opens at sunrise, and taught a flock of goats to text me when they get restless. Saturdays smelled like coffee and cedar shavings. Neighbors Frank and Eleanor from next door traded blueberry pies for eggs and long stories. There's a road that reaches my place, older than most roofs around here. It passes through a pocket of homes run by the Golden Meadows HOA, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, a community sign with expensive cursive. I'm not in their HOA and never will be, but my deed carries a recorded easement, filed, stamped, witnessed, permanent access, no matter who mows the verges. For 2 years, it worked fine. I waved at joggers. They waved back. The road and I had an understanding. Then a certified letter arrived, heavy with corporate perfume. Urgent meeting, it said, about illegal road usage and security enhancements. I wasn't a member, but the road in question was the one I drove daily, so I cleaned the grease off my hands and went. A thunderstorm escorted me to the community center. I parked my muddy pickup between 2 SUVs so shiny I could see tomorrow in them. The foyer smelled like lemon cleaner and low tolerance for boots. Inside, 20 residents sat in tidy rows. Frank gave me a small, worried nod. On stage, a tall man in a perfect suit smiled like he was selling all-inclusive paradise. Maxwell Bennett, he announced, new HOA president, former real estate development executive. Beside him, Patricia Lawson clutched a tablet like it contained launch codes. Maxwell breezed through landscaping contracts, pool renovations, the barbecue date, then flicked to a slide labeled Ranch Road Situation, like it was an afterthought. As many of you know, he said, clicking to architectural renderings, Golden Meadows Estates will increase property values significantly. Phase 1, 12 executive homes, private clubhouse, tennis. One obstacle remains the unsightly ranch that funnels undesirable traffic through our beautiful community. His smile landed on me. He unveiled a stone column security gate and 8-foot fence. Beautify the entrance, control traffic. Construction, he added, begins tomorrow. My chair scraped the floor. Name's Ethan Morgan, I said, palms open, voice level. I own that unsightly ranch, and I have a recorded easement across this road. You can't block a legal right-of-way with a vote and a mood. The room held its breath. Maxwell's smile thinned. Mr. Morgan, he purred. What you had was an informal arrangement. The HOA has full authority over roads and security. We'll be happy to sell you an access card, $300 a year. He gestured at the board's obedient nods. Apply promptly to avoid inconvenience. Not informal, I said, recorded, at the county, since 1972. I looked at faces, not slides. This road has connected neighbors to neighbors longer than any of us have been annoyed by dandelions. Maxwell moved on as if facts were furniture you could walk around. The meeting adjourned with polite applause and clenched teeth. Outside, rain whispered on leaves while George Miller, a 60-something with kind eyes, approached. He's trying to push you out, George murmured. He promised investors higher values if he solves the ranch problem. Gate first, then code violations, then water hassles. He's done it elsewhere. I drove home with thunder folding the sky and called Olivia Nguyen, a real estate attorney I'd known since college. She answered on the third ring and listened like lawyers do when they smell a case and a friend in the same sentence. "Ethan," she said, "a recorded easement isn't a suggestion. It runs with the land. Get a certified copy from the county in the morning. If they actually lock you in, call the sheriff. Meanwhile, document everything. Photos, dates, names. Assume nothing. Verify everything." I slept like a man waiting for sirens. They didn't make me wait long. At dawn, the backup beep of heavy equipment pulled me to the porch. An excavator was chewing holes for fence posts across my access road. Workers in neon vests poured concrete like certainty. 8 feet of steel marched left and right until it met oak and caliche. The gate rose at the center electronic, cameraed indifferent. I grabbed my deed and walked down. "Who's the foreman?" I asked. A man pointed toward Maxwell's arriving SUV. Maxwell stepped out immaculate, permit folder in hand. He waved it just enough for the edges to flash, not enough for me to read. "This is HOA property," he said. "You'll need an access card. $3,000 annually. Patricia can process you today. Approval takes 5 to 7 business days. Temporary card for a week, because we're not monsters." He smiled like he'd invented mercy. "You can file whatever you like. Courts are slow. Development is not." "You're blocking my only legal access," I said. "That's not security. That's leverage." He tilted his head, amused. "Times change, Mr. Morgan. Patricia handed me a temporary card the way you hand a cat a bath. Expires in 7 days, she said. No payment plan. I swiped through the brand new gate to leave my own property and drove straight to the courthouse. The registrar adjusted her glasses, read the easement, and hummed. "Perpetual access since 1972, she said, stamping the certified copy. Strange anyone would test it. I clutched the paper like a lifeline. Olivia spread the documents across her desk and nodded. "You're right on the law," she said, "but wrong on the calendar. Emergency injunctions take weeks. Maxwell's banking on delay. Document. Don't escalate physically. If they trap you, we call the sheriff and the local paper." I drove home past a gate that scanned my temporary card like I was a guest at my own life. Humiliation has a taste. It tastes like metal and dust. Anger makes some people loud. It makes me precise. I walked the fence line with my survey from the sale and a measuring wheel. Something was off. Down near the live oak with the lightning scar, the line curved where the plat said it shouldn't. I mapped it again. 2 hours later, my notes and the iron pins agreed. The eastern gate pedestal and one fence post sat 3 feet inside my property line. A small error measured in inches, huge in consequences measured in law. "Tell me I'm not imagining this," I said to Ryan Cooper, a contractor friend with a toothpick grin and a tape measure that had seen things. He walked the line, checked the pins, compared to my recorded plat, and spat dust. "They built on your dirt," he said. "Bet they figured you wouldn't catch it, or if you did, you'd just stew. Don't stew." We called Olivia. She exhaled a pleased note. "If a structure sits on your parcel without your consent, you control the structure sitting there," she said. "Get a licensed surveyor to certify it. Then we'll decide how loud to make this." The licensed surveyor set tripods and prisms under a punishing sun and left with data. While we waited for the stamped map, a bad idea turned into a good plan. If they turn my road into a toll, what's fair is fair. On my land, I could levy a property access fee for the slice the road crossed. I could also have fun doing it. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking, Booth." I nodded. "Solar, battery backup, cameras with cloud upload, receipt printer, the whole airport experience, minus the plane." He grinned. "Let's make it legal and pretty." We spent a weekend at the speed of necessity. Trips to the lumber yard, electrical supply, print shop. We checked setbacks, culvert clearance, sight lines. We poured proper footings on my side of the line and built a compact, tidy booth with a covered operator bay and a lift arm rated for ranch trucks. I wrote the control code myself. tied it to a payment terminal and a backup battery, and pointed 2 cameras at anything a late-night vandal might love. The sign read, "Private drive property, access fee $20 per crossing, $100 monthly pass." Another, for clarity, "This section of road is on private land. See survey posted. Sunday afternoon, traffic returned from lake trips and soccer tournaments." The first minivan slowed, window rolled down. A bewildered dad blinked. What?" I kept my tone friendly. "This road crosses my property right here. The HOA established paid access on their section. I'm simply doing the same on mine. You can pay per crossing or grab a monthly pass, card, cash, or mobile. Receipts print with parcel number." Some residents fumed, some laughed. Most paid. A few called the police. "Please do," I said, pointing to the survey posted under plexiglass and the stack of certified copies with the county seal. Officer Ramirez already has the CAD notes from a prior trespass call and knows where my line is. By 4 p.m., the neighborhood group chat was a forest fire. Patricia arrived with groceries, froze at the sign, and dialed Maxwell with a finger that looked like it wished it was a sword. "This is illegal," she hissed. I shrugged. So was that gate on my dirt. Maxwell rolled up hot at 4:30, dust-coating his ambition. He stomped to the booth and declared, "For the benefit of the gathering audience, you're blocking a public road." I gestured politely at his own gate. "You're the one who declared it private," he demanded I lift the arm. "Pay the fee," I said, "or park and walk to your private gate and figure out your own rules." He called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived like a man with better things to do than babysit egos. He listened to both of us, read the survey, studied the pins, checked my certified copies, and made a note. "This is a civil dispute about property lines and easements," he said at last. "Mr. Morgan appears to be on his land. If you dispute that, Mr. Bennett, get a survey and call a judge. Until then, nobody cuts anybody's structure." He tipped his hat and drove away. The crowd dispersed like a theater audience denied its fight scene. Maxwell glared holes through me and retreated to Plan B. Plan B arrived at 2:03 a.m., wearing hoodies and poor judgment. My motion sensors pinged, the cameras rolled. 3 figures approached the booth. Spray paint hissed, a crowbar kissed metal, and someone hissed, "Hurry," with a voice that belonged in a boardroom. The payment terminal sparked and died. The barrier arm splintered. The main camera went black, and the 2 backups kept recording. One angle caught a face perfectly as a man looked up to see why his sabotage wasn't working. "Hello, Maxwell." By sunrise, I'd filed a police report, sent stills to Ramirez, and forwarded the footage to Olivia, plus a cloud link to 3 trusted friends. I posted a short clip on social media with a caption, "When HOA says, pay to pass, then hates paying." Ryan arrived with steel plates and a welder's grin. We rebuilt the booth by lunch, stronger than before. Armored casing, tamper alarms, a second lift arm nested inside the first. I mounted a tasteful sign, special rate for Maxwell Bennett, $1,000 per crossing. That one was more comedy than contract, but it made a point. Monday night, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Frank texted me updates from the back row. Residents weren't mad at me anymore. They were mad at paying twice because a president wanted to play developer. Nancy Fletcher, 20-year resident, social gravity of a small planet, stood and asked why legal fees were exploding and gates were multiplying. Patricia stared at her tablet like it could fog and hide her. Maxwell promised swift legal remedies. The room promised to remember who promised that. Meanwhile, I did what any consultant with insomnia and curiosity does. I researched. Public record said Platinum Ridge Developments was courting Golden Meadows for a satellite luxury project. LinkedIn said Maxwell had strategic partnerships with them. A leak from a resident landed in my inbox, an email where Maxwell wrote that once Morgan accepts he can't access easily, he'll have to sell. Olivia tracked permit filings and found that the application showed the gate in a different location than where it was built. Omission of easements is not an accident. It's a strategy with a keyboard trail. I invited Maxwell to a negotiation at Olivia's office. He arrived 15 minutes late with their attorney, William Davis, and the air of a man expecting to teach me a lesson. I offered a simple solution. I'd dismantle the booth and drop charges if the HOA removed the gate and signed a recorded affirmation of my easement. He laughed. "We have more money than you have patience," he said. "We can litigate until your goats are grandfathers." He bragged about herding his board and smoothing investors. He said, "The development will happen with or without you. Pick profit or pain." He said all this into a room with a small notice on the wall. This conversation may be recorded. Texas is a one-party consent state. I was that party. The next morning, I published a thread. Vandalism video, permit discrepancies, the easement, the encroachment survey, the conflict of interest emails, and a clip from the negotiation where a certain HOA president confessed to his strategy. I sent the package to Zoe Sullivan at the Chronicle. Her article landed Sunday, "The Toll War at Golden Meadows when a rancher fought back." Local TV followed. The neighborhood Facebook group detonated. The HOA board convened. Residents shouted. Maxwell called my evidence doctored and malicious. The room regarded the words and kept asking for receipts. I had them. Lots of them. By midweek, William Davis had resigned as HOA counsel with a statement so dry it risked wildfire. Maxwell was suspended pending investigation. Nancy stepped in as interim president and called me. "We'd like a truce," she said. "Gate down, easement affirmed, fees reimbursed, damages covered, legal bills compensated. We need our neighborhood back." I exhaled 6 days of held breath and said, "Send Olivia the draft." We signed a settlement that looked like common sense finally putting on shoes. The gate came down with the same excavator that put it up. The fence retreated to the rightful line. The access road looked like a road again. I kept the booth up for one last day and donated every dollar beyond costs, just north of 15 grand, to a land rights defense fund. Frank grilled. Eleanor brought pie. Neighbors arrived to apologize for honks and harsh words. I told them what I believed. We got played by someone who thinks power is louder than paper. Paper won. Platinum Ridge quietly withdrew. A conservation trust bought the parcel that would have been Phase 2. A year later, wildflowers stood where renderings once promised tennis. I repurposed the booth hardware. The lift arm became a balance beam on a kid's playground. The panels power a small outdoor classroom. The cameras watch deer trails instead of vandals. We put a sign at the old gate site. Never pick a fight with a rancher who builds things. If you came here for vengeance, you might be disappointed. What I got was better. I got my road back, my neighbors back, and a blueprint for anyone cuffed by an HOA's bad ideas. Document. Be lawful. Be inventive. Ask the sheriff to stand on paper, not politics. Ask the press to stand on facts, not flames. And when you win, build something where the fight happened, so kids grow up knowing what it costs to keep a road open. I wish the story ended there with a clean settlement and the sound of a fence being unbolted. But the week between the board suspension and the signature taught me what pressure looks like when it's out of better ideas. On day 2, my temporary card expired, and, right on cue, my favorite nanny goat decided her kids were coming early. I loaded her into the trailer at dawn, rolled up to the HOA gate, and watched the reader blink red like a joke, with timing. I hit the intercom. Nothing. I called Patricia. Voicemail. I called Maxwell out of habit. Then, out of spite. Silence. For 2 minutes, I felt what they had meant for me to feel, all along, small, trapped, ridiculous. Then I remembered what Olivia said about false imprisonment when illegal egress is blocked and dialed the sheriff. Ramirez called the gate vendor, had them perform a remote override, and told me to document that sequence like my life depended on it. On camera, I said the date, the time, the contraction count. The barrier slid, the trailer rolled, and the goat and I made our appointment like we were driving through a plot hole that had just been patched. Back from the vet, I walked the corridor of pines until my heart came back down. Anger is gasoline. Caution is the spark plug. I printed 3 laminated cards for the truck visor. Easement section 1972 certified copy. Contacts county registrar, sheriff, attorney. Recording notice audio, video may occur. I added a dash mount that records a rolling hour and auto uploads over cellular. When fear tried to knock, I handed it a clipboard and told it to help me inventory the facts. Neighbors began treating the toll booth less like a provocation and more like infrastructure. A science teacher bought a monthly pass and asked about the solar panels. I walked him through the watt hours while his kids pressed their faces to the glass like raccoons at a bakery. A nurse in scrubs paid on her way to a night shift and whispered, "Don't let him bully you." People think HOAs are law until somebody makes them read. An older man, hands shaking, handed me a 20 and said, "My wife can't take detours. Thank you for not backing down." I added a posted note in big letters. Passage will never be denied in emergency. Ring bell. We open. Maxwell filed a complaint with the county claiming I was operating a business without a permit. The inspector came on a Thursday. Cautious, courteous, curious. I showed him the survey, the easement, the location of footings on my parcel, and the code citations that applied to temporary structures on private drives. He measured setbacks and sightlines, checked that the arm would break away on impact, and left with a shrug that sounded like, "I have bigger problems than your receipt printer." The report later used the phrase property access fee rather than commercial toll. Words matter when you are trying to keep a road open without starting a war with a tax assessor. The HOA tried one more sneaky lane change. A mass email stating that the private road beyond their gate would be closed for a beautification weekend. The flyer's fine print announced fines for vehicles passing during volunteer hours. I replied, all with the injunction draft Olivia was preparing and a friendly P. "You can't fine people for crossing dirt you don't own." Nancy responded 10 minutes later, "Board wasn't consulted. Meeting requested." That was the hinge where the door finally swung the other way. At the recall meeting, residents lined up like a town trying to remember itself. One man in gym clothes confessed he'd backed Maxwell because property values, then lifted his hand and said, "I was wrong." A mom in a minivan asked why the board's lawyer sat at the front like a second president. Frank stepped to the mic and said in the voice of an engineer, "Gate good, fraud bad, the order matters." Patricia stared at a spot on the carpet like it owed her something. Maxwell said misunderstanding 8 times in 3 minutes. Nancy said, "Vote." Hands went up, and with them, the temperature. Between meetings, I kept the ranch alive. That detail matters. Petty fights try to turn your day into their subject. I refused. I built a gravity feed for the stock tank so the well pump could rest at night. I fixed a wind-twisted hinge on the barn and rewired a GFCI that kept tripping. I delivered eggs to Eleanor and replaced 3 of Frank's porch boards. Villains prefer you exhausted. Competence is resistance. Zoe asked to film an update, not a victory lap and explainer. We shot in the kitchen, 2 mugs steaming between us. She had me mark the original easement language on paper and read it like poetry. Perpetual right of ingress and egress across the following described strip of land. Then we cut to B-roll of the surveyor driving steel into earth, a quiet metronome of legitimacy. Over that we laid Olivia's voice. Easements run with the land, the right attaches to the property, not the person. A vote doesn't erase it, a gate doesn't trump it. The piece ended not with my face, but with the map. It's hard to argue with a line that outlives you. On the morning the settlement was due, a last flare popped. A junior board member slid me a DM. "Heads up, Maxwell is pushing for a surprise special assessment to cover legal fees. He's telling people you'll pay it once we bankrupt you." I screenshotted, forwarded to Nancy, and left it alone. The board went into executive session. 30 minutes later, the email hit. The HOA rejects any special assessment related to actions taken outside governing documents. We pursue an amicable settlement as outlined. I stood in the yard and let the sound of wind in the oaks wash the adrenaline out of my bones. When the excavator returned to pull the gate, people showed up like it was a parade. Kids sat on tailgates. Neighbors brought folding chairs and lemonade. I stood back and filmed the bolts coming out in reverse order of their installation, one by one, like a time-lapse of common sense. The operator lifted the frame. It swung once like a tired argument, and then it was just steel again, demoted from cymbal to scrap. Someone clapped. Someone else shushed them, and we all laughed at how strangely holy a quiet road can feel when it stops being a battlefield. We signed at Olivia's conference table 2 copies each, a notary with a steady stamp, and a settlement that read like a glove finally turned right side out. Affirmation of easement, removal of encroaching structures, costs and fees. Nancy shook my hand with both of hers and said, "We took too long to get here. Thank you for not letting us stay lost." I told her the thing I'd been saving. I'd rather live next to neighbors than a narrative. She smiled the tired smile of someone who just fired a bad idea and has to manage the grief it leaves behind. I kept the booth 1 weekend more, by request. People wanted photos with it like it was a folk hero. I printed 1 last batch of monthly passes, stamped VOID as souvenirs, and stuck a QR code on the glass that linked to a PDF of the easement education in exchange for novelty. Then we disassembled, panels off first, then the lift arm, then the shell, leaving only the footing pads like footprints heading in a better direction. The arm became a balance beam on the kids' course by the creek. The panels now power an outlet at the trailhead where folks charge phones and kindness. The cameras found a second life watching for coyotes near the chicken run. 3 months later, you could still find a faint rectangle of dust where the booth had stood. That's where we put the sign, "Never pick a fight with a rancher who builds things." Under it, smaller, and "Read your easements." Frank said it needed 1 more line. Eleanor suggested a heart. We compromised with a tiny goat silhouette that makes kids point and parents grin. Maxwell tried a defamation claim, and the judge dismissed it in a paragraph that could hang in a museum of plain English. He took a plea on the vandalism, wrote a check, served his hours, and sold his house to a family that waves with their whole arm when they pass me on the lane. Patricia resigned and months later sent an email that started with, "For what it's worth," and ended with a map of everything she wished she'd said sooner. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of mercy for the part of her that already knew. The last piece of the story isn't cinematic, it's lazier, softer, surprisingly durable. The ranch became a little school. Saturdays, we run a workshop called From Sun to Socket Kids, solder a simple LED circuit, then step outside and see the same logic scaled to panels and charge controllers. On Sundays, we hold a quiet hour where neighbors bring documents they don't understand, plats, HOA, bylaws, county letters, and we translate from lawyer to human. People leave with a list and a little less fear. I still drive the same road. The trees still knit their fingers over it in summer. In winter, the wind leans sideways, and the live oaks pretend not to notice. Some mornings, as tires rumble across that unremarkable strip of Kalishi, I hear the echo of the first day the gate went up, the beep, 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 the clean certainty of new steel. Other mornings, I hear only birds and a loose bolt in the truck bed tapping a rhythm that says, in its own small way, you belong here. If you're here because an HOA letter made your hands shake, take this as permission to steady yourself with paper. Read, record, ask, repeat. Hire 1 good expert. Make 1 kind friend. Call 1 decent reporter. And if you're wired like me, build 1 small, stubborn thing the world can see. Not to humiliate, but to demonstrate. Bad authority hates sunlight and receipts. Before I talk about the lesson, I want to lay down the week exactly as it happened, hour by hour, because clarity is the only antidote I know for polished lies. Monday was shock and steel. Tuesday was paper and patience. Wednesday was wire, code, and sweat. Thursday was neighbors learning to read maps. Friday was vandalism at 2-3 a.m., and steel again by noon. Saturday was a meeting where a community recognized itself in the mirror. Sunday was signatures and a quiet road. Monday, 6:20 a.m. The excavator arrived before the sun cleared the live oaks. I filmed the first post hole because first holes are where stories begin. Maxwell stood with a clipboard like a general giving the sky orders. Patricia walked the line, head bowed to her tablet as if it were scripture. By 8 a.m., the gate's concrete footings were curing. By 9:15 a.m., the first camera pointed at me. I pointed 3 back. 10:30 a.m. I drove to the county. The registrar pulled the deed book like a magician pulling a rabbit, except her trick was real. Perpetual right of ingress and egress, she read, and yes, the word perpetual always sounds like a bell when it's read aloud in a room with filing cabinets. She stamped, I paid, and we both nodded at the idea that ink can still outrun swagger. Tuesday, 7:05 a.m. Olivia drew a line on a legal pad and wrote, timeline in block letters. Courts run on calendars, she said. Our job is to make the judge's calendar tell our story better than Maxwell's. We plotted file date, service date, hearing window, notice period, survey appointment, media strategy that said receipts, not rage. 2:40 p.m. A licensed surveyor named Kim set up tripods like a ballet that smelled like dust. She measured distance to rebar pins and old oak scars, muttered numbers that sounded like coordinates to treasure, and left with data that would become the stamped truth. At dusk, I checked my notes and felt the first clean click of confidence. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Ryan and I checked setbacks and sight lines, measured twice, poured once. I bolted the payment terminal into a steel cradle, like it might someday meet a crowbar, and I wanted the crowbar to go home ashamed. The software was mine, simple, logged, redundant. Every transaction printed a receipt with a timestamp and parcel number. Every camera streamed to the cloud. Every battery had a twin. 4 to 15 p.m. First car. A teen in a hand-me-down sedan. Is this a prank? No, I said, and explained like a teacher who respects bewilderment. He paid, shook his head, and laughed the tired laugh you get when the people in charge confuse petty with powerful. Thursday, 8 a.m. Inspector. He measured the breakaway force on the arm and checked that sightlines cleared 250 feet in both directions. He asked if the booth had a foundation. I showed him the footings on my parcel and the breakaway bolts that would sacrifice steel before they harmed a bumper. He pointed at the solar array and grinned. Backup? 2 layers, I said. And a third if the sun keeps its job. He left with a clipboard full of reasons not to bother me again. 11:10 a.m. An email blast from the HOA beautification weekend private road closed. Fines listed in cheerful fonts. 10 minutes later, I replied all with the certified easement and a 2-sentence courtesy. That portion of the road isn't yours. Please correct. Nancy replied, 12 minutes after that, Board will review immediately. I underlined that in my notebook because words like immediately don't come easy to boards. Friday, 2:03 a.m. Motion sensor ping. 3 figures. Spray, pry, smash. The main camera died. The backups did not. Maxwell glanced up right into the lens with the face of a man who has never considered that cameras don't care who signs checks. By 2:11 I had pushed the footage to cloud. By 2:30 a.m., Ramirez had the link and a log number. By noon, Ryan had welded a steel sleeve inside the lift arm, and my sign about the special rate was getting more engagement than anything I'd posted in a month. Saturday, 9 a.m. The recall meeting. Nancy opened with a sentence engineers love. Let's separate facts from feelings. Maxwell called my video doctored, and the room called him prove it. Patricia tried to talk about process, and Frank said process is a road. We need to know where it goes. A mom with a toddler on her hip asked why the HOA was paying for a lawyer who vandalizes booths at 2 a.m. William Davis was not present to answer. 2:30 p.m. I met a man named Luis at the booth. He's a nurse who crosses this road for half his life. He paid the fee and slid an envelope through the window. a note that said, "Stay steady," and 2 tickets to a minor league game. We aren't friends, not yet, but that gesture felt like a hand on my shoulder at just the right angle when the spine forgets how to be brave. Sunday, 11 a.m. Olivia's office. 2 copies, 2 signatures, 1 notary stamp, and a settlement that did not sing but hummed the tune of sanity. Nancy cried a little at the corner of her eye where she thought no one could see. I didn't. My body stored the relief somewhere behind my ribs for later. After the settlement, the days got longer and softer. That's where stories usually fade. But I want to keep the lens rolling, because aftermath is where you learn whether you won the fight or just the round. The HOA rewrote some bylaws with Nancy leading like a good foreman, clear steps, clean tools, no shouting. Frank joined the architectural committee and brought a scale and a level to the first meeting so people would remember what measurements feel like in hand, not just on paper. Patricia resigned and learned the quiet sport of not defending mistakes. I kept building small things. A solar-powered sign at the trailhead that says, "Slow down," in a voice made of LEDs, and consideration. A weather station that texts the neighborhood when a storm is acting like it might pull a trick. A simple bench at the highest point on my place where the road looks like it's smiling. Kids call it the toll throne and take turns holding court there with peanut butter sandwiches. The press moved on, as they should. But some Sundays, a new family drives slow past the old gate site, stops, and asks if they can see the easement. I keep a laminated copy in a box attached to a post. Take a photo, I say. Black out names. Show your HOA what a stamp looks like. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just touch the seal like it's Braille for courage. A month later, Ramirez stopped by off-duty with barbecue and a grin. He stood in the drive and said, "You would not believe how many calls we get that start with, 'There's this HOA,' and end with, 'We don't know if this is criminal or civil. We need more people who own a printer and a highlighter.'" I handed him an iced tea. And we stood in the shade saying nothing, the way men say thank you when the whole story is already on file. Another month, Zoe sent me a link to her award. I clicked it and shook my head, because journalism is not supposed to need awards to be brave, but sometimes the world gives you the right sticker. Her follow-up piece wasn't about me. It was about how to read plats and what runs with the land means. It got less traffic than the vandalism clip. It might save more trouble. If you're looking for tricks, the list is not glamorous. Read, write, file, film. Carry copies. Don't bluff. Ask questions like you expect answers. Make allies who don't look like you. Give second chances that aren't chances to hurt you again. And when you build like someone mean might try to break it at 2-3 a.m. If you're here because an HOA letter made your hands shake, take this as permission to steady yourself with paper. Read, record, ask, repeat. Hire one good expert. Make one kind friend. Call one decent reporter. And if you're wired like me, build one small, stubborn thing the world can see. Not to humiliate, but to demonstrate. Bad authority hates sunlight and receipts. One last thing before I shut the mic. Drop a comment with the wildest HOA rule you've seen. I'm building a map of nonsense and a toolkit for what to do about it.